I'm pretty sure she doesn't need an introduction, though, because you already know her. Carol has been working in ELT for over 30 years as a teacher, trainer, materials writer, and educational consultant. And she specializes particularly in early years and primary English language teaching. One of my favorite books, I have to say, from Macmillan is 500 Activities in the Primary Classroom, which is one of Carol's books. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you know that book as well. She's also the author of Tiger Time and a new course that you might or might not know yet, but we'll find out more about now, Mimi's Wheel. And I think it's called Ferris Wheel in the American version. And then, of course, indeed, everyone in Georgia knows Carol. She is also the former president of the IATEFL. And in this webinar, Carol will discuss the role of fantasy and reality in early years English programs and the benefits of including a balance of both. And I think there's nothing else that I can say other than enjoy. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Carol.
Okay, thanks very much, Anna, for that lovely introduction. And hi again to everybody out there. It's fantastic to see all of you here. And in this webinar, what I want to do is to start off talking about teaching very young children English at all. Is it realistic to think that we can do this successfully, or is it a fantasy? In other words, is it worth doing it at all? What I'd then like to go on to do is to look at the role of fantasy and reality in the early years and explore a range of practical activities based on reality, fantasy, and a blend of both. And we'll see how these activities contribute to different aspects of children's emerging language skills and their overall social, emotional, physical, cognitive, and creative development. And my aim today with you is really to convince you that adopting a balance between fantasy and reality in early years English programs makes teaching and learning more effective, pleasurable, and successful, both in the immediate term and the longer term. So to get started then, I have here $1 million question for you. And the question is it fantasy or reality to think of, there we go, my computer was blocked there, I think. Is it fantasy or reality to think that we can teach preschool children English effectively and successfully? What do you think? Can we teach young children successfully? Do you think yes or no? Do you think we can do it using reality and fantasy? Okay. Yes, you think we can. Well, that's lovely to see you all so positive and using both. Yeah, exactly. And of course, it depends. I mean, the thing is, although in mother tongue, bilingual and immersion contexts, we can legitimately talk of children as little sponges in the Montessori sense of absorbent minds. In foreign language classroom contexts with reduced numbers of hours, it's far more problematic. And the elephant in the classroom, if you like, is age. And it's a question that we in our bit of the profession have been obsessing about for years. Is younger better to start English or not? What do you think? Let me see your answers in the chat box. Is younger better or not? Yes, better, yes. Oh, I love you're so optimistic, you're so positive. That's absolutely fantastic, because actually there are many people who wouldn't agree with you on that. And so I'd like to start off with the bad news and what some of the research says. Because actually research says that on older learners, it shows again and again that older learners have a better grasp of grammatical concepts and patterns that they can easily transfer to when they're learning a foreign language. They also have greater cognitive maturity and better developed learning strategies and skills. Older learners, they're also more efficient at acquiring facts and concepts. And the last point here, they have more practice at conversational skills. And all this, so the research goes, or some of the research, makes them better, faster learners than younger children who take much longer to cover the same ground. Some research has also shown that children starting later can quickly catch up with and even overtake learners who started several years previously. But my first thing to you about this would be, when anyone talks to you about this issue, is a health warning, and to recommend that you put your critical thinking hats on when you're looking at the research. For example, how many children were included in the study? If it's only a few, how significant is it? How have the results been measured? Have they been measured in terms of number of hours of instruction without paying any attention to what was actually done in the classroom? Or have the results been measured in terms of particular kinds of testing outcomes? And if so, were those children prepared for the tests? And did they reflect the kind of teaching they'd had? And often in these research studies, which show us that we shouldn't be doing it, there's actually no information about the teacher, the pedagogy, the curriculum, or the resources and materials used. So the research shows negative things about starting younger, but we need to put our critical hats on when we're looking at that research. And we also, before you all feel too depressed, research shows that there is some good news for us. And the good news, to start off with, is that actually in the long term, there is a correlation between the amount of time children spend learning English and when they start, and the development of their own linguistics and communicative skills and fluency. And I've seen this in my own experience. I remember when I was working at an institution for quite a long time, for 4 years, and I saw the children growing up, having started young and then moving on to something like first certificate. And the ones who had started really young, they used to have this kind of uncanny kind of instinct for what might be right when they were doing something like a gap fill exercise. There are also positive effects on pronunciation. And Anna Maria Pinter's written about this in her book in 2006. And I know it myself from my own classroom. I always remember feeling quite mortified when I would hear 4-year-old children imitating my voice exactly when I say something like, "be quiet." And at first I thought they were parodying me, but no, it's just because they were imitating me so accurately. There are also cognitive advantages. Now, these have been written about at length in very complex and academic ways, for example, the work of Bialystok, but the idea that, if you like, the foreignness of foreign language learning becomes a catalyst for new thinking, and it enhances flexibility in thinking. And children also develop learning skills and strategies. For example, I have many examples from my experience, but one I'll just mention to you. Learning the colours, 4-year-olds in Spain, and one child guesses that white is going to be blank because it's blanco in Spanish, and he's learnt that elefante is elephant, so why not blank being white? So using that kind of cognitive skill and hypothesizing there. The next point, to do with meta-linguistic awareness, the awareness that language and its objects are actually independent of each other, and that there are many ways that we may refer to one object depending on the languages that we use. There's also seen to be a positive effect on literacy and oracy in children's own language, that actually learning English offers literacy supportive experiences and can have a positive effect on the whole attitude to literacy, including children's confidence to speak and listen and engage in communication. And the last bit of good news is to do with the intercultural dimension. It gives children, through learning another language, that gives children insight into their own culture and those of others. And actually, through an understanding of otherness, children develop their self-concept and an understanding of their own identity. They also develop skills such as empathy and tolerance and respect for others. So, in summary, the research tells us a lot about the pros and cons of starting earlier or not, but it doesn't yet give us a definitive answer as to whether younger is better. And the key factor, as Sheila Rickson said actually several years ago, but I think it's still true, is the key factor is creating optimal conditions. Now, research also gives us quite a lot of pointers as to the key ingredients of what is likely to be effective and help us create those conditions. I'm going to show you some of them now, and please add more ideas to the chat box, okay, because I only had so much room on my slide. So here are some of the ingredients that help us create those optimal conditions. Can I see you adding more ideas in the chat box? Any other ingredients that you'd like to add? Any other ideas? Clown, good consistency, fun, rapport, lovely, 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 joy, love it, creative, fantastic. Lots of wonderful ideas. However, of course, there's no single perfect ingredient. Oh, I love all your ideas, absolutely. There's no single perfect ingredient, and there's no right way to combine and implement those ingredients. And as Rod Ellis has written, while research is important, as he says, it's not capable of providing teachers with recipes for successful practice. But as teachers, successful practice is exactly what you're interested in. So which of these ingredients, or any of the lovely ones that you've mentioned, would you choose as key? Which ingredients would you choose as key? Can I have a look and see in the chat box? What are your ideas? Dancing and singing, lovely play, fun, imagination. Exposure, fantastic, fantastic, lovely. And in a way, we want to say, I think, all of them, no? But actually, if I'm forced to go for one, based on my reading, my research, my intuition, and above all, my experience, both in the classroom as a teacher, as an observer, and also my experience as a parent, I would actually, and I had to go for one, I would go for, can you guess? Okay, I would go for engagement. Partly because engagement is a superordinate that includes a lot of the things that you've mentioned. And engagement has been described, this lovely quote that I like by Andy Burns and Griffiths, and they talk about engagement as the fertile soil that enables sustainable learning to take root and flourish. And I love that quote. It's like the starting point for everything for us as teachers. Without engagement, nothing else is possible. Remember that famous proverb that you may know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And of course, what we want to do is make our children thirsty for learning. Yeah, could I repeat it? I will. The fertile soil that enables sustainable learning to take root and flourish. Okay, so we're going to have a look at engagement through fantasy and reality. Fantasy that fosters the development of imagination and creativity. It leads to improvisation and role play, provides opportunities for make-believe, pretend or free play, which allows for experimentation and risk-taking, and develops social and emotional learning, for example, empathy and cooperation. and also provides opportunities for children to communicate using all the language in their current linguistic repertoire. And we can compare that or balance that with reality, which provides an opportunity to build on what children know and learn content from other areas of the curriculum. It provides an opportunity for them to use language in meaningful and purposeful ways. It develops cognitive and pre-academic skills, things such as working memory, categorizing, sequencing, reasoning, deducing, and I'm sure you can think of others as well. It also allows for the integration of values that relate to children's immediate lives and opportunities to develop life skills, language and intercultural awareness, and social and emotional learning. And in the middle there, we've got a blend. And I'm talking here not in the technological sense, but a blend between fantasy and reality. And that when we do this, we combine the benefits of both. So let's have a look at some examples. And the examples we're going to look at in terms of reality, we're going to look at engaging children through thinking skills, learning about the real world, and values education. And in terms of fantasy, through developing imagination and creativity, through experimenting with improvisation and role play, and providing opportunities for free play. So let's start then with developing thinking skills. Young children need to develop a wide range of basic thinking skills across the curriculum. What kind of thinking skills? Would you like to put your ideas in the chat box? What kind of thinking skills do young children need? HOTS, exactly, HOTS, higher order thinking skills, creative thinking, critical thinking, and so on. They also need the LOTS. They definitely need the LOTS. They need to develop their working memory. They need to be able to predict, to hypothesize, to categorize, to sequence. We need to use LOTS to build the HOTS. And these skills are important for children's pre-academic development. And they also, and this is important, they provide a context for using a new language in ways that are appropriate, challenging, and enjoyable. Yes, lovely lot of thinking skills coming in there. Okay, but talking about complete basics, a basic cognitive ability for learning a language is to be able to remember and recall vocabulary and chunks of language. We have to be able to do this. And activities based on visual observation help children to develop their visual memory and to associate sounds and words with pictures or objects. They also give them practice in repeating and saying words. So in a game like What's Missing, a very simple game that I'm sure you all know, but actually very important in terms of developing visual memory and language skills and recall, and children are motivated to recall what's there. So are you ready to do this now? I want you to write in repetition's essential, absolutely. Write in the chat box as soon as you identify what's missing. What's missing? Quick, quick, quick. What's missing? Tomato. Yes, it might have looked like an apple. It's actually a tomato. Okay, so you're all ready. You're all ready now to do it. What about this one? Are you ready? Quick as you can there. Quick as you can. What's missing? What's missing? Yes, the chocolate. Absolutely. Okay, and let's do one more. Quick as you can. Who can be first in the chat box? Are you ready? What's missing? Apple. Fantastic. And in a game like Kim's game or memory, you might give children a minute to remember all the objects, okay? And actually here there are 10 altogether. So let me see if you can get them all in the chat box as quick as you can. Come on. Fantastic. Yes, lovely. Yeah, we don't mind whether we call it biscuits, cookies. Oh my God, yes, okay, fantastic. I think you've done it. I think you've done it. I think you've also imagined a few extra ones as well. Here you are. You can check whether you've got it right. Okay, so what we're actually doing there is developing this visual memory as well as motivating children to learn the language as well. Okay, another basic skill, very basic, is categorizing. And you can use categorizing to recycle vocabulary from familiar lexical sets. For example, here we've got an example with transport and animals. And you might say, well, how kind of easy is that? But remember, we're talking about small children here. And actually, the concept of categorizing is an important one for them to understand, that you can actually put things into different sets or groups. And categorizing activities are also very helpful in getting children to understand and apply concepts. For example, we might categorize food which grows in the ground and food which doesn't, or clothes we wear in summer and in winter, and you might have other ideas that you can put in the chat box there. And actually, with older preschool children, we can ask them if they would like to choose how to categorize the pictures themselves, so to actually be creative. So they might categorize the animals they like or don't like, or transport they use or don't use, and so on. So categorizing we're developing both thinking skills and language skills in an integrated way. Another basic important skill at preschool is sequencing, and this helps children develop memory skills and recall and understand the concept of chronological order. So, for example, after telling a story, you may ask children in a physical classroom to come to the front, give them a story card, just one each, and they don't change it, and with the help of other children, get them to stand in a line to show the order of events before retelling the story. Now, on the screen here, I've deliberately left the numbers there so you can see the order, but this activity helps children to remember the story and the animals the children meet in order as part of the story before they end up falling in the pond. Okay, so sequencing, a very important thinking skill and language skill that produces useful language. And we can also use sequencing to describe a process, for example, the life cycle of a butterfly, for example, or the stages of growing plant, which we might see in just a moment, or washing your hands. So thinking skills, the development of thinking skills, engaging children with reality. Moving on, engaging children through learning about the real world. And this builds on their natural curiosity about the world. It links learning to other areas of the curriculum. It makes learning and using language meaningful and purposeful, but also provides a context for applying basic thinking skills, such as the examples that we've seen. So let's have a look at an example. And this one is about how plants grow. And this provides a context for understanding a process and a sequence, as well as practicing useful vocabulary and language. So children might listen and point to the pictures. They then complete the pictures and identify each stage. And we might do a little rhyme with the children to help them understand the process. You can do this with me now. You're at home. Let's plant a little seed in the ground. Here's the sun, big and round. Give the seed some water, soft and slow. Here's the plant, grow, grow, grow. Okay, lovely. And if you feel like it, you could also sing that to the tune of I'm a Little Teapot, if you know that song. It's a traditional song that you probably will know. Then what children can do is they might make a vertical zigzag book. and join in telling a little story with you. I don't know if you can see my vertical zigzag book here, because they join in telling the story as they gradually unfold their books. And this, by the way, this vertical zigzag story comes from an idea with my co-author, Anna Soberon, that I used to work with her, and this was one of our ideas. And so I've used it with children many, many times. And you tell the story and they open their books. So it goes like this. So I plant a seed, the roots grow. Can you see the roots there? The plant grows. Can you see the plant growing? The leaves grow. The flower grows. Okay, so this is a multisensory, kinesthetic activity, and children join in telling the story with you. And then, of course, they can take it home and tell their parents as well. And we can also do a lovely drama activity and act out the story. You can't see me doing this now, but you're a tiny little seed, and I get the children to be like a little ball on the floor. Now you've got roots. Let me see your roots. Now you grow, and you've got leaves. You grow and grow, and you've got a beautiful flower. Okay, so all these ways then of reinforcing understanding of the language and the real world content there. Another activity here to do with the real world and learning about floating and sinking. Okay, and by about the age of 3, children have acquired the concept of floating and sinking. And floating and sinking encourages predicting and hypothesizing, visual observation, recording of the results. Okay, it's actually, mini scientists at work. And it's also very useful for practicing everyday vocabulary, such as classroom objects. But you might say to me, don't expect children to be able to ask the question using the dreaded third person S. But you may be wrong, as you'll see in just a moment. So what you need to do this activity is a transparent bowl of water. Here you've got like a fish aquarium. Actually, what I use is a cut-off plastic bottle, the 5-litre bottle of water. And this is a very good way of recycling plastic so that it's no longer single-use but multi-use, because I don't want to have breakable glass in the classroom. And so we can encourage children by asking them, holding up the objects, what about the crayon? Does it sink? Does it float? What do you think? Let's find out. We drop it in. I mean, we could do this also when we're teaching children online. And we could also use a little song for this, which goes like this. Okay. Does it float? Does it sink? Here's a pencil. What do you think? Does it float? Does it sink? Here's a pencil. What do you think? And then you have a look and you drop it in the water and see. Okay, so you might join in singing at home. My voice, I've been talking too much today, but okay. Does it float? Does it sink? Here's a rubber. What do you think? Does it float? Does it sink? Here's a rubber. What do you think? And then you put it in the water and find out. And actually, when you use that little song to the tune of Little Brown Jug, if you know that traditional tune, you'll be surprised that children actually learn that question as a chunk of language. And children, of course, can then observe and record what happens, okay? So they could record what happens on a sheet like this. Alternatively, and what I very often do, is I give them a picture of the bowl with the water line across, and they draw the objects either on top of the water or at the bottom, depending on whether they float or sink. And then what we can also do, and this is wonderful if you're working at home and online, get the children to go and find small objects to try out. So they go rushing off and they come back with maybe a key, maybe a coin. Well, no, we've had a coin there, maybe a small rubber ball or a toy car, and they can then try them out on you, or you can try them out in the classroom and see whether they sink or float or not. So moving on to engaging children through reality, through values education. Now, values education is very much to do with the whole area of social and emotional learning, and children need to learn values in relation to themselves, in relation to others, and in relation to the world around them. And values education is about children developing self-awareness and the capacity to make responsible decisions and choices about the way they behave. And the best way to develop values education is through everyday activities and lessons. And sometimes I think we forget that the activities that we do have this benefit. And one that I'm thinking about particularly is circle time. Because circle time is a way of focusing on here and now values in the children's immediate environment. It develops a willingness to take turns when speaking, to listen to what others have to say without interrupting, and to show respect for views that may be different from your own. So children may sit in a circle, and we may just, if we're doing food, for example, we may go around the circle saying, I like bananas, I like apples, and so on. I can jump, I can sing, I've got a teddy, I've got a car. And the rules are, obviously only one of those at a time, the rules are that you only speak when it's your turn. And you say pass if you don't want to speak, because you have that choice. And that is absolutely legitimate and right to give children that choice. And they use their mother tongue or shared classroom language if they need to. With little children, I pass an object. I've got a toy microphone and I pass it round the circle as a visual signal of whose turn it is to speak. And when done regularly, children soon realise that actually circle time gives everyone an equal opportunity to speak and be listened to. And this makes it, sitting with masks is not possible. Okay, yeah, no, that's true. We'd have to have a standing up circle and it would have to be very distant or smaller groups. You're absolutely right. And that's fantastic that you're adding these ideas for adapting any of the activities we talk about in the chat box. But the important point here is that one of our typical classroom activities is not only good for practicing language, but develops all these social skills and values as well. We might also develop values through songs, okay? And songs provide a very powerful way of reinforcing values. So in the current pandemic, we might teach children, this is the way we wash our hands, wash our hands, wash our hands. This is the way we wash our hands when we get to school, when we go out to play, when we go to lunch, after we go to the toilet, and so on. We can invent verses. Or actually, because it's more likely to be, because washing hands does take a long time, this is the way we use sanitizer, sanitizer, sanitizer. This is the way we use sanitizer when we go out to play. And actually, if you teach children that they should be washing their hands or rubbing the sanitizer in while they sing the whole verse, that's a good length of time to make sure that their hands are really clean. We can also develop values through stories. For example, this is just a very little story in a little book of values. And these two children who are called Harry and Zoe, and they're actually practicing the recorder and the piano for a school show. And in the story, they get very fed up and a bit discouraged because they aren't very good. And mum and dad encourage them, but they're not very good and they feel fed up. But they practice and they practice and they practice. And on the day of the show, they managed to do really well. And you can see all the mummies and daddies clap and congratulate them. And this then naturally leads to children saying what they practice. We give them prompts, maybe they practice, kicking a ball or catching a ball, or playing their recorder, or other different things, or hopping, and they talk in their mother tongue or shared language about how important it is to do that. And the last way I want to show you about developing values is to do with showing situations which show contrasting values, and actually raise children's awareness that they have choice and responsibility in the way they behave. So here children identify the picture that shows playing well together, and then they may talk about, Eddie the elephant in both pictures, because he's really not cooperating in that first picture, and you can talk about the importance of playing well together. Okay, so moving on to engaging children through fantasy, I want to look first of all at developing imagination and creativity. And you know something, it's often said how imaginative and creative children are until they start school, and that from then on they very quickly learn that it's right answers that count. And so it's really important to build on children's capacity for imagination and creativity whenever we can, in order to develop flexible, fresh thinking, allow for ownership of learning, motivate children, and make learning pleasurable. Now, obviously, there's overlap always between fantasy and reality, because we've already seen quite a few examples of creativity. And this is small c creativity with preschool children. But for example, getting children to choose the way they categorize things, we talked about that. Getting them to creatively mime a plant growing. Getting them to choose their own objects that they're interested in seeing if they sink or float. And also the creative ways that children may respond in circle time, telling you, bizarre foods that they like that you weren't kind of expecting. And in terms of imagination and creativity, stories are, of course, come into their own again. And they often provide a wonderful context for developing children's imagination and creativity. And here's just a very short version of the Three Bears story. But the point is actually getting children to do a creative activity after the end of the story, and children come up with their own ideas and draw a picture of what happens. And it's quite, if you do this, children come up with the most extraordinary things. I mean, they may come up with, okay, Goldilocks invites baby bear to her house, and there's Goldilocks' family, or maybe, the bears take Goldilocks to the police. All kinds of things will come up, and you're actually building on young children's capacity for imagination. Very often, moving on, very often in preschool classrooms, language and interaction is highly controlled. And in a way, this is understandable because they have such limited competence, but we need to provide opportunities also for improvisation and role play. And I just want to show you the kind of thing, because you might think role play, how can, preschool children do role plays? And it's true that it needs to come out of language that is already very familiar. So this role play based on transport would come out of a story and then a song where the language is, I want to go by bike. Oh yes, me too. Come on then, let's go by bike. So it's familiar language. But what we might do in getting this to develop into a role play, invite one child to point to one of the pictures or choose a flashcard, depending on the situation we're in, and say, I want to go by, or just name the transport. Some children won't be capable of saying the whole sentence, so they just say car. And another child says, me too. And the children, if you're in a physical classroom and if you're at home, they would set off round the room there, miming. So I want to go by aeroplane, I want to go by plane. And as they do this, everyone else claps and says, fantastic. Okay, so we have that creativity, we have that physical movement, we have that choice and imagination, in choosing the transport and acting it out, and everybody else positively affirming. Okay, and the last example to do with engaging children through fantasy is providing opportunities for free play. And you might think, free play, no way, okay. But free play is really important because it gives children a chance to make mistakes, take risks, choose things, take decisions, and become more autonomous and responsible learners, and to cooperate and develop empathy with others. And also they're naturally, with free play, going to mix their languages, okay? But that is not actually a problem because the benefits are far greater. And you can do this through setting up learning stations. And a learning station is an area in the classroom where children play freely with resources that, and this is absolutely key, that you have previously used in teacher-led activities during the lessons. That's why I put these examples here. For example, that plastic food on a tray, or you might leave the puppet there and some flashcards and so on. And the idea, it's best to just start off with one learning station, and children go in pairs, easier to manage, or groups, maybe for 3 to 5 minutes at the end of the lesson when they finish doing individual work. If you're in the physical classroom, a learning station online is not possible, of course. And what happens is that children have a chance to play with familiar resources. You need to tell them that they need to use their quiet voices when they're at the learning station, and you encourage them to use as much English as possible, but you don't force them, okay? It's just encouragement, and the older preschool ones will get that. But actually what happens when children go there to play is they tend to replicate the activities that they've done in class. And one of them usually pretends to be the teacher. They love doing that. So for example, if in your learning station you had, that plastic food that we did one or two, we did the what's missing, it's likely that the children will play with that. And this gives them an opportunity to really internalize the language and to make it their own. And as you get used to working with learning stations, you can set up more. And if you're working with a course book, you might, at the end of the unit, even devote a whole lesson where children take turns to visit different learning stations. Now, for you as teacher, you need to keep a very close eye, but not interfere unless you really have to. And if you eavesdrop a little bit on what's going on, it also gives you hugely useful feedback on the learning that's taken place. Okay, so moving on, we've had a look then at 3 examples of engaging children through fantasy and reality. And I want to have a look now at an example of a blend. And fantasy and reality is often blended when we use stories. And we get the benefits of both. For example, you may have imaginary anthropomorphic animals, anthropomorphic ones that speak, and they may be in a realistic context doing very normal human things such as going to school or shopping, or they may be in a fantasy context which is combined with real world information. So let's have a look at an example. And this example, the story is called Honey for Tea, and this story is actually suitable for children at the end of preschool or possibly year 1 of primary. And I put 3 questions up there that I'm not going to read out, but I'd just like you to think about during the story. I'd also like you to be ready to join in the story with me. And as I can't hear you speak, you'll need to write words in the chat box. Obviously, I couldn't do this with preschool as fast as you can. Okay, but first of all, a little bit of prediction. What do you think is going to happen in the story? What's this story going to be about? Any ideas in the chat box? Dr. Zeus is great, absolutely. They're going to ask for honey. It's tea time. About a picnic, maybe a picnic. Yes, and they've got a friend. And okay, fantastic. Yeah, about friend, exactly. Okay, lovely, lovely ideas. Inviting someone, perfect. Okay, so we do a bit of our prediction there. So, are you ready to go with the story? So, Mimi, this is Mimi here, and Dylan. Mimi and Dylan's friend, Bruno, is coming for tea. And Bruno loves, guess what? Honey. I've got an idea, says Mimi. Bees make honey. Let's find the bees and get some honey for tea. Great idea, says Dylan. But where are the bees? I don't know. Let's find out. Along comes a wriggly worm. Hello, worm, says Mimi. We want to get some honey. Where are the bees? Oh, I don't know. Ask the ladybird. But what's a ladybird, says Dylan. A ladybird? Oh, Dylan, a ladybird's red and black. It's got spots. Oh, wow. Has it got wings? Yes, it has. Has it got legs? Yes, it has. It's got 6 legs. Amazing. Oh, look, Mimi. Here comes the ladybird. Hello, ladybird. We want to get some honey. Where are the bees? I don't know. Ask the snail. But what's a snail, says Dylan. A snail? Oh, Dylan, a snail's brown and white. It's got stripes. Oh, wow. Has it got wings? No, it hasn't. Has it got legs? No, it hasn't. Amazing. All the children love joining in with that. You can try it at home. Amazing. Oh, look, Mimi. Here comes the snail. Hello, snail. We want to get some honey. Where are the bees? I don't know. Ask the butterfly. But what's a butterfly, says Dylan. A butterfly? Oh, Dylan, a butterfly's many different colours. It's sometimes got spots and stripes too. Oh, wow. Has it got wings? Yes, it has. Has it got legs? Yes, it has. It's got 6 legs. Amazing. Oh, look, Mimi. Here comes the butterfly. Hello, butterfly. We want to get some honey. Where are the bees? Follow me. Come and see. Thank you, butterfly. Oh, wow. It's Bruno. Hello, Bruno. Hello, Mimi. Hello, Dylan. Here are the bees and here's the honey. It's for you. It's yummy. Oh, thank you, Bruno, and thank you, bees. Let's go home and have tea. So Bruno got to the honey first, after all, at the end of the story. Okay, so let's have a look at those questions again. So how are fantasy and reality mixed in the story? Well, okay, it's a lot to write in the chat box. So we've got the fantasy idea of the bear and the meerkat and the bear having tea together. and looking for the bees and for the honey. And then embedded in the story is this real information about tiny animals and insects that children are going to learn as part of their real world context. And actually research shows that children learn science concepts much more easily when they're embedded in stories. Now you might say these aren't, hugely big science concepts, but they are laying the groundwork for later, classification work of bugs. And so the fantasy context helps to engage children with that real world knowledge as well. In terms of the target language here, we have the names of the bugs, we have spots, stripes, wings, legs. We have language like it's got, has it got, yes it has, no it hasn't. And in terms of they should know the source of honey, absolutely they should. And what features of the story help the children learn, do you think? What features of the story? The questions, the repetition, the repetitive pattern, absolutely. The visuals, that you learn about the animals, then you see them, and then everything that we always do when we tell stories to young children, with our voice, with our intonation, with our encouragement to join in, with eye contact, facial expression, all of that stuff that we do. Okay, so using a story like that, we have also a range of possible follow-up activities. And for example, we may have a story song and a role play. Now, for me, one of the huge benefits about singing in relation to songs, in relation to stories, is that it provides a transition from language that children have a global, receptive understanding of, to them actually using it. So when they learn language in a song, this then is like a stepping stone to then using it in a role play. So in this particular case, they might be singing and then acting out, hello worm, we want to get some honey, where are the bees? I don't know, ask the ladybird, please. So they can then act out that role play with picture cards of the different animals, or looking at pictures and pointing to pictures if we don't want them to touch them. We can also act out the story, and of course with this age group we're talking about two groups, half the class and half the class, okay? And with Bruno at the end, you can perhaps take that part yourself, but the children are in two groups and they're acting out the story and turn taking using flashcards and pictures as prompts. We've also got, in relation to content, we can have a lovely bugs quiz. We can say, it hasn't got legs, it hasn't got wings. What is it? A snail. It's red and black, it's got 6 legs, it's got wings. What is it? A ladybird. Okay, and so on. So we can have a bugs quiz. And of course, what children are doing then, they're developing their listening comprehension skills. They're also developing logical deduction, recognizing the features of the bugs. We can also do possibly the life cycle of a butterfly. We didn't do all of these, we can select from them. The life cycle of a butterfly, and also, as somebody earlier said, bees are so important, the life of bees, and bees are in danger of extinction these days. So it's really, really important that we teach our children to understand about bees and to value them. We can link the story to culture. We may do Incy Wincy Spider, even though the spider wasn't in the story, it's another bug. Or we might do, 2 little butterflies sitting on a wall, a version of the 2 little dicky birds. We might also tell the children another story, a picture book, okay? One that is better known than the Bible all over the world, so I know it needs no introduction, The Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle. We might also do a project or poster a project, making a poster, sorry, or a diorama. A diorama is one of those three-dimensional projects where, you know, we would get the children making their own book out of modelling clay, so doing lovely, you know, wriggly worm and adding it to the scene, and you just pair the background there, you know, the grass and the flowers for the bugs to go on. And then, of course, we can do loads of other activities related to our project, you know, find the bug that's pink and so on. Okay, in terms of values, we're going to use the story as a springboard into values to do with, well, the usefulness of bugs, caring for your world, being kind to tiny animals, not just, you know, if a bee comes into your house, you know, not just treading on it and killing it, but trying to, you know, give it a way out so that it can fly away again. And of course, creative thinking. We could get our children to invent and draw an imaginary bug. We could also use the activity that we did with the 3 bears earlier in the session and actually get children to invent and draw what happens after the end of the webinar. You know, what does happen after they have tea with Bruno? I mean, who knows? You know, children can be very creative thinking about what happens. So we're coming to the end of things now, and we've actually had a look at engaging children through reality in these 6 different ways. And we've also looked at an example where we use an integrated mixture of both fantasy and reality to engage children. And all of these provide flexibility and opportunities for multisensory learning, and to ensure that we teach children that they participate with motivation and pleasure. So we started this session, if you can remember back, with the $1 million question. You remember the $1 million question about whether it's worth. Is it worth it? You know, think of it. Is it worth teaching English to preschool children? And I'm delighted that you all actually agree that on balance it definitely is. And I would like to end with my $1 million answer, which is this: use fantasy and reality to engage preschool children and teach English effectively and successfully. That use the blend, sometimes fantasy, sometimes reality, sometimes a blend, in all those different kinds of ways, the examples that we looked at. So that brings me to the end of my session. So thank you very much, and I'd be very happy to take any questions that you may have. If you zap them in the chat box, I might be able to see them and answer. Thank you for all these lovely comments. That's really lovely. It's going so fun. It's going so fast that I'm not spotting a lot of the questions. There's something about incorporating new technology there. And implementing new technology. Well, I'm on the baby slopes of implementing new technology, and I'm not sure what you mean by actually new technology. I mean, I think with preschool children, there's a limit to the kind of tools that we can use. We can use much more varied tools with older children. On the other hand, there are some fantastic digital materials available that many different, you know, publishers and organizations produce. And I think those are really, really important to use as well. Could I share an example of a diorama? A diorama, I mean, basically you make a 3-dimensional, you can do it with a cardboard box, right? A cardboard box that has, you know, 3 sides, although I would cut back 2 so that you cut them off so that you can see in. So it's like a sort of stage or a theatre, and the children make 3-dimensional three-dimensional models. Do I see much difference in teaching online and face-to-face? Yes, I do. I see a huge difference. I think with preschool, there are lots of things that we can adapt from our classroom practice to use when we're with our children online, because the important thing is to keep them with us and keep them engaged. And there are many things that we can do. For example, like, that What's Missing game, we can set that up online as easily as we can face-to-face. So in many ways, I think it's easier with preschool children teaching online, but the sessions need to be very short, and you need to do a lot of you don't need to be sitting like I am here. You need to be standing up, getting them moving, getting them joining in, getting them to go and get things. Have you got an apple in your house? Can you go and get it? Show me. And you also have the support of parents sitting with their children, although that is a support, although sometimes it can also be problematic, but they are there as well. Any other? How to grab students' attention during storytelling online? I think that's quite problematic, and one of the things that I know that is good to do, and because I know lots of teachers have told me this about story videos that I made during the first lockdown, that they actually use those in their lessons rather than telling the story themselves. They make a recording of yourself doing the story, so you can then engage the children, you can pause, you can do things with the story rather than throwing yourself into it so wholeheartedly that you can't actually get all the children's responses. Okay, any other questions? Any other question? How many language points? Well, I think the key is not to have any language points in a way, but to have children exposed to rich and natural language, and to give them the opportunities to acquire it. I mean, we saw in that story there were language points, has it got? Yes, it has, and so on. But I think the key with this age group is not to kind of try and drum that into the children's head, but to provide natural, repeated exposure that you draw them into using. What about teaching multilingual children? That's a very good question. I think it's really important with multilingual children that they feel that all their languages are valued by you. So, I mean, in classrooms in Spain, you have children with many different home languages and backgrounds, and you need to include, let's, for example, let's take the register and children respond by saying hello in one of their other languages, for example. Or you're learning a new word, elephant. So what's elephant in your language? Can you teach me the word elephant? And the children are the teacher, and you can see them kind of blossoming with self-esteem and pride in their own languages. So, yes, any other questions? What's this one about mischief? What was this about mischief? Some techniques to go, yeah, okay. Well, the key technique is don't let it get to you. Don't stop to focus on anything that isn't actually stopping you teaching and learning, and children learning. And that can often happen with mischievous children because that's what they want. They want your attention. And if you give it, you're giving that attention to one child, and 29 others, or however many you've got in your class, are not getting it. So as far as possible, you just carry on, you engage the positive. And do you know what very often happens when you do that? The children themselves do the management for you, because the majority of them, they want to do what you're doing, and they don't want this distraction. I know it doesn't always work, but it's something to think about. Can you use familiar fairy tales? Yes, you can. It's interesting. You get different reactions to familiar fairy tales, because I think children are I remember with my own children when they were little and they had learnt all the traditional tales in Spanish, not in English, because in the park there always used to be puppet shows, and they would not want those stories in English because all the refrains and everything were in Spanish, and they just didn't want them in English. So I think you have to be sensitive to how your children feel. On the other hand, with other children, they resonate with them because of that familiarity, and they love to meet, you know, Goldilocks in a different context. And it gives them that security that they know the story. But you have to tune in to your children to see how they react. Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. Any other questions here? Can we teach a story even if it's not related to the topic of the unit? Yeah, I mean, normally we have some kind of relationship, don't we? I mean, like maybe it's about food, but there's also, you know, there's no rules about it. I think, you know, and something that's refreshingly different may be wonderful for the children. Contextualize them in our schools. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Good. So thank you, Carol. And thank you, everyone, for your questions in the chat box. But first of all, Carol, thank you for such an inspiring webinar with lots of practical ideas. And thanks, everyone. You're showing all the love and appreciation, and indeed, great speaker, fabulous. And I think there's a lot for us to take away and bring back to our classroom. And I love that question and the answer you gave, Carol, about can we use stories that are maybe not related to the topic? I think we all like stories. And I'm very happy that you say for kids, that is a very valid approach to teaching. So thank you so much for everything you've given us. And yes, everyone, you will get access to the slides. Check your email, and there is a recording, and you do get access to that later as well. So thank you so much, Carol, for a lovely, lovely talk.
No, thank you, Anna, for presenting it and hosting it, and thank you to everyone here from all over the world for your lovely participation and enthusiastic response. You know, which is absolutely wonderful to see, and we're obviously on the same page when it comes to teaching young children. I just saw somebody ask about the role of praise, which could be the subject of another webinar, but yes, it is hugely important. But praise that gives children information about what they can do and builds up their capabilities. So yeah, fantastic.